I'm Julianne of Leafling Learns, and I never know how to answer questions about how I started learning Japanese because it's super convoluted, so let's talk about it. I wanted to take some time today to lay out the long and winding journey that I have taken learning Japanese. Because it is so windy, I often don't know how to answer what level I am or answer questions about what were the first steps that I took personally. I've learned all sorts of random things. I've forgotten those things. I've relearned those things. And I don't know if I really fit into a specific level. So let's just get into it. I was exposed to Japanese at a fairly young age because my mom, when she was in school, actually studied there for I think a half of a year. So my mom's house just has like random Japanese books, random Japanese items, and I just kind of grew up seeing that stuff, right? Here's my mother's kanji book from the 80s, and inside you will find my very first kanji from age 3 or so. I've always been super interested in languages and linguistics, and Japanese was just one of the first languages that really enchanted me. My first sleepaway summer camp experience was when I was 14 or 15, and it was actually a Japanese immersion summer camp, believe it or not, kind of crazy. The camps are called Concordia Language Villages. They have all sorts of languages, run through Concordia College, and they're fairly well known throughout the States. I remember there were a lot of kids who were flown in from all across the country to come to this summer camp. And the idea behind these camps was that it was based on immersion. So my first language learning experience was actually immersion learning based. Basically, all of the camp counselors, or sensei, only spoke to us in Japanese. All of the activities that we did, most of which were cultural activities, including only eating Japanese food. All of these activities were conducted in Japanese throughout the day. We would maybe do an hour or two of actual lessons, but those were conducted in Japanese as well. And I think an hour at the end of the day, right before bed, is when the counselors in your cabin would speak English to you. So this was a lot of Japanese, and it was extremely horrifying at first. I was very uncomfortable. I barely knew anything. I did not think I was going to make it through this. Like, I really just barely knew a few words, right? But the thing is that it did get easier. And, you know, I started to make some friends. It started to become fun. I went back 2 more years after that, and genuinely, these were like the greatest times of my adolescence. As you can see, this was a dark time for me. Rest assured, I was one of many teenagers going through an uncomfortable phase. In the interest of their privacy, I will not be showing you that, so please just use your imagination. I'm still friends today with almost everyone that I befriended back then. The only really sad thing about this for me when I think back on it is that I was just so shy and insecure that I hardly spoke any Japanese at all. I just found it too embarrassing. I was too afraid to make mistakes. I'm sure it was a complete nightmare for the counselors trying to coax me out of my shell, because I just didn't come out. Like, I didn't come out of my shell, not in a speaking Japanese sense, at least. I came out of my shell personally, but barely spoke any Japanese. I mostly spoke English when I was there. Like, that's disappointing. And unfortunately, to say, that discomfort and shyness about speaking Japanese has mostly carried with me, and I'm still trying to break out of it now. Anyway, I bought Genki 1 at some point during those years. I'm pretty sure we used it. Like, I had it at camp. We must have used it, and I guess I got partway through that at the time. During the school year, between camp sessions and then after I stopped going to the camp, I really wanted to keep working on my Japanese on top of schoolwork and everything. And I was a child of the internet, And in my travels, I came across the AJAT blog, or All Japanese All the Time. If you're not familiar with this, this is the blog that inspired Matt vs. Japan and many others, and MIA/Refold is basically just riffing on AJAT's ideas but making them a little more organized and a lot less fun. Anyway, I was quite enchanted by these funny and all over the place blog posts talking about immersion and using fun as your method for learning. Obviously, I was already in the immersion camp, and the results this guy were talking about just seemed incredible. I'm not going to get into detail here, but AJAT and MIA both promote some extreme ideas, including ideas about good versus bad ways to spend your time. If you're hearing this and you don't think they're extreme, that's fine. I'm not trying to fight with you. But the fact of the matter is that attempting to follow this methodology, part of that includes incorporating a voice in your head that asks you whether you should be doing something you're doing in your native language in Japanese instead. Maybe that voice is super fun and nice and reassuring for you, which is amazing, and I'm happy for you. However, for me, I already personally am constantly chastising myself for how I spend my time. So this was just a new voice being added to a squad of negative voices that I already had, and this one was just letting me know I was doing something wrong anytime I wasn't doing something in Japanese. Now, I will say, as a teenager, and a teenager whose father had recently passed away, who was dealing with that by not dealing with it, or really acknowledging it at all, I think I was more susceptible to all or nothing thinking, and I didn't have the maturity or the capacity to take the good things and leave the bad things. So basically, this is when I started doing Remembering the Kanji, which is a book. Maybe you're familiar with it. I started doing that, as well as mostly passively listening to and watching Japanese stuff, and then belittling myself for not making progress or not spending every waking moment doing Japanese things like I was supposed to do. Keep in mind, I was also in school and doing school stuff and exam stuff for college or whatever, and I had friends and stuff too. So at the time, it didn't make sense for me to be trying to do this, but I didn't know that. I just thought I had to do it all. So at some point during college, I dropped Japanese. I always had it in the back of my head that I wanted to get back to it, but it felt like I had fallen off the horse and the horse was long gone at this point. In 2016, a couple of years after college, I was presented with the incredible opportunity to go to Japan with some friends at an incredibly discounted price. This was going to be my very first time going out of the country, and I was so excited that I was going to be going to Japan. So of course, my moment to pick Japanese back up had finally arrived. I needed to be the translator for 3 other gaijin on the trip. I really don't even fully remember what I did to prepare for this trip. I think there were about 3 months of me saying like, oh, I really gotta brush up on my Japanese, and then another 3 months of like actually doing it. I know I must have restarted remembering the kanji again, and I think I got through like 700 of those, 400 of which I already knew from ages ago, and I really can't remember what I did to prepare other than that. I think I probably used Genki 1 a bit. I don't think I finished it. Oh, I must have started using Hello Talk then to practice talking to people. I think I mostly type to people, which isn't super helpful if you're gonna be speaking to people out loud. But I did make a friend on that app who is now a real life, genuine dear friend of mine. Maybe I'll talk about that at some point. So I go to Japan for a couple of weeks and it's amazing. I loved it so much. I somehow managed to get around. I talked to people, I made stuff happen. I don't actually have a lot of photos of me in Japan. There's like 1 photo of me, but I did take a lot of photos of cats that I met at a cat cafe. I hope they're doing well. I think I was the stage of beginner who doesn't yet realize just how much they don't know. I don't know if other people can relate to this, but I feel like there's a phase of beginner where you're like, I've got this, but then you reach a higher stage of beginner and you're like, oh, fuck. But I mean, I was feeling pretty confident, which is great, and it worked out all right. I do remember after the trip, my deepest regret was not learning any food kanji. Menus were a nightmare. RTK did not help me a ton with that, but if a menu didn't have photos, sorry everyone, I can't help you. After that trip, I'm like ready to go back again. Like I want to go back, I'm motivated, I'm ready to finally take Japanese seriously, and I don't. I drop it. And I need you all to know that every time I have dropped Japanese, I feel horrible. I feel awful. I feel deeply ashamed. I feel regretful. And I'm always wondering what's wrong with me. Just like asking myself, why can't I seem to do this? Other people do this. Why can't I do this? Every year after that, I'm setting resolutions of like, oh, like I'm finally gonna finish RTK, or like, oh, I'm gonna be conversational in Japanese. It doesn't happen. I restart RTK several times. I think the farthest I ever got was 800 kanji, but then I give up on it. I will say, as much as the quitting over and over again hurts, I'm not too mad about how many times I restarted RTK, because I now feel like those initial kanji are just like locked into my mind forever. Okay, so finally we're at the happy part of the story, okay? It all comes together here. It's the summer of 2019, and my naive ass snatches up some $600 tickets to Japan, Cherry Blossom Season 2020. January 2020 is when I begin a new approach to accomplishing goals, and this approach includes baby steps and heaps of self-compassion. My main goal for that first quarter is to improve my Japanese before my trip to Japan at the end of March. I do a lot of experimenting and I have a lot of fun. I set the bar low for myself every week, so I'm always exceeding expectations. During my commute to work every day, I would listen to Miku Real Japanese's shadowing audio that you can get on her Patreon. Highly recommend that. I started taking weekly italki lessons despite how fearful I am of speaking. I go through all of Genki 1. I'm more or less skimming it, just to see if there's anything basic that I missed when I switched to immersion learning. That would be good for me to know. I start reading graded readers and watching some Japanese things a little bit in my free time, and I start using Anki again. According to my time tracker, I spent 105 hours from January through March on Japanese stuff, which for me was just incredible, especially considering I was working full time. And then the world fell apart, and I did not get to go to Japan. So I knew that I did not want to fall off the horse like I always had in the past. I knew I had different tools now in the form of a new mindset to actually make this happen for myself. I also definitely needed a hobby while quarantining for what ended up being a year plus. So using my new approach to goals, I decided I was going to complete RTK once and for all. And I actually did. I completed it, which is crazy after how many times I restarted it. And once I completed that, I really knew that something that I was doing this time around was different. I did drop italki for a few months, and my Japanese time in general dipped due to some losses in my family during the summer, which just left me completely gutted. But this time, I knew that I could pick myself back up when I was ready, and I didn't have to keep starting over. I started doing italki again every 2 weeks, which I'm still doing now. I used Tobira some with that tutor, and otherwise I basically just rely on immersion techniques such as sentence mining, and I do my Anki reps nearly every day. I also found the StudyGram community on Instagram, which I did not know existed. I started posting there for accountability, and language learning had felt really lonely for me before. Like most of my time outside of those weeks of summer camp, it was really just self-directed. So using Instagram to have it become something social and supportive and positive has really helped me immensely. Now I'm somewhere in the intermediate level, unclear where exactly, but somewhere in there. But every day I am amazed because I recognize I've never made it this far before. After more than 10 years, 13 years or so. I'm amazed that, you know, it's been 13 years or so of wanting this to work and restarting, quitting, starting again, quitting, starting again. I've never made it this far before, and now every day I'm moving forward, and it doesn't have to be this quitting and restarting thing for me anymore. Language learning doesn't feel like a goal to be accomplished anymore. It's now just an important part of my everyday life, and I think that adjustment has made a world of difference for me. So that's my entire Japanese language learning journey laid out for you. Progress isn't linear, folks, okay? So it's fine. It's fine if you've quit before. It's fine if you've restarted before, just as long as you're learning from, I guess, what went wrong, right? I intend to be making videos more regularly now. I'm thinking I might even do it on a weekly basis, maybe. Every week or two, I'm thinking I'll be making videos. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, give me a little subscribe if you would. I gotta get out of here. I gotta fucking get out of here.